Chapter 8. What's stopping you? I trust by now that you are starting to view you differently, or at least you are starting to see that change is possible and that you can be hopeful of that courageous future of freedom as you see the strength that is available to you. Long before I was an author, my father-in-law asked me a very weighted question. He said, Vian, if you could do anything or be anything and money was no object and there were no barriers in your way, what would it be? I told him that I wanted to make an impact on the world. I wanted to travel and share my story to encourage others to have courage. But when he replied with, "What's stopping you?" I don't think I had ever been more annoyed yet more intrigued by someone as I was in that moment. How dare he imply that I was holding myself back? What was I going to do? Just leave my job? Who really gets to live out their dreams anyway? It's expensive to travel and I can't afford that lifestyle. As if someone is actually going to pay me to speak. Besides, traveling is hard on me physically, and there are too many challenges. It took me 3 months to recover physically from that trip to Africa. And to get a window into that incredible experience, if you haven't already, you can read about that in my first book, Going Farther. But living out my dream seemed impossible. Plus, isn't that something only people with lots of money or time on their hands can do? Just as I said before, how dare he imply that I was holding myself back? While I was annoyed, it definitely got me thinking. This question turned out to be life-changing for me. So I'm going to ask you the same question with the hopes that it will have the same effect. If money were no object and there were no barriers in your way, what would you do? Or simply put, what's stopping you? See, you're not going to be held accountable or you're not going to be laughed at for shooting for the moon or dreaming big. This is a safe place. So write down your big dream. Write it down. And don't forget to dream big. Then, beside your big dream, write out what's stopping you. Write out the things that you feel are a barrier from pursuing that dream. Simply stating I can't is not an acceptable answer. Write out the why. As you have also read, believing lies can also be a barrier, right? And so I have asked the question many times and have gotten many different responses. However, I don't know which is more disheartening, giving up on your dreams or not dreaming big enough. Maybe you're thinking, I just want peace. But is the barrier to that peace conflict at work or at home? Maybe your barrier is financial. Maybe your barrier to your courage and freedom is a past experience or trauma. Maybe you've suffered loss or someone has wronged you and it's left you with a jaded view of God. Or maybe you simply don't believe that there's anything good in your future. What's in your way? What's stopping you from pursuing your dream? Whatever it is, take a few minutes to write it out. If these obstacles weren't in your way, what would you do? If you are already living out your dreams, congratulations. I want you to write out what you are dreaming for next. Maybe you need the courage to keep going because your dream is bigger than you even imagined. And you need the strength to carry it. You never want to stop dreaming or going farther, but you can be sure you'll need to keep growing your strength and courage to do so. If you are living your dreams, you will agree with me that it is definitely not easy street. I have included a diagram with my answers to the questions I've asked you from when I first started stepping out and dreaming. And I trust that it will help you write yours. But before I share that, let me say that for the record, I haven't always had everything documented. I spoke at a conference one time and they said that documentation is everything. They said if it isn't written down, it doesn't exist. I've totally come to understand that to be true in my own life. If I didn't write it down in the hours surrounding the event, there is no way I'll be able to remember the emotions of it 1 year later, or even a week after, the way I did in that moment. Some of the key elements of my first book would not have even been accurately shared with you if I didn't journal about it. I understand that sometimes we are just not ready to reflect on our feelings, and that's okay. But even writing that statement, I'm not ready, will help you when you are ready for that next step towards your healing. So what was my big dream? You already know it, but I'm going to say, I want my story to be an inspiration to others and empower them to have courage. My current reality, or barrier, if you will, myself, because I said, why would I write a book? First of all, I'm not smart enough to write a book. Plus, who wants to hear what I have to say? Not to mention, I'm afraid people will judge me. Another big dream I had was, I want to exercise and work out because it makes me feel good. And it would be nice to walk. But my current reality or barrier to that was, why am I working out or trying to walk again? I'm too old to be learning to walk. Plus, it seems I'm always starting over and it's so frustrating. So why even try? As I have shared many times in the pursuit of my dreams, I was overwhelmed with fear and insecurities. And as you may recall, some of my biggest barriers existed when I didn't realize there was even a barrier. That's a sad reality because I thought I was free. One of my favorite times in the year was January. Okay, minus the snow and 30 below temperatures. However, looking past that, I really anticipated the one conference here in Edmonton, formerly known as Breakforth. Every year I would put lots of thought into which sessions I would attend. Sometimes it's easy, like when I knew like Philip Yancey or Kay Arthur or Lisa Bevere would be coming, of course, I always select those sessions. However, other times I look at the topics that are aligned with the season of life that I am in. But each year I always chose sessions that encouraged or challenged me. So in 2017, when I saw freedom, there was actually a freedom session offered at this conference. I was like, woohoo, it's going to be a great session for me. I can do this. I felt proud of the fact that I am free. I might even feel inclined to give myself a little pat on the back. You see, I felt pretty good about where I was. I had conquered so much in my life already and was just about to step out into my dreams with the release of my first book. This was the same year I was also being trained to be a life coach. And while I knew I hadn't had it all together, I was confident in the fact that I felt free. So the day came and I rolled into the crowded room. I was surprised to see that so many had selected this freedom session. My first thought was, wow, this is a hot topic. But at the risk of sounding like a show-off, I told myself I would not comment or share that I felt confident in my freedom. The session began, and with the presenter asking us about things that we have in our lives that might be a barrier between us and God. I had already beaten some big strongholds in my life, and while I knew I wasn't perfect, I didn't think I had anything. And when he started listing off things like pornography, stealing, the list went on and on, including all sorts of addictions. I was like, nope, I'm good there. Oh, no problem there, until he said it. That thing I didn't even know was a thing. People pleasing. What about people pleasing, he said. I didn't even know it was a thing. It was like a shock to my system. Do you mean this would be something as damaging in my life as pornography? I immediately thought, I don't know what he's going to say to help me here, but I'm all ears. After he listed off a bunch of the barriers, he went on to ask us this. So, when was the last time you did that thing? In my case, people pleasing. I thought, oh dear, that was just today. He continued by asking, why did you feel the need to do that? And how did you feel after you did that thing? With his probing, I reviewed the setting in which I had reverted to people pleasing. Perhaps I had chosen to do it because I wanted to keep the peace, or perhaps I wasn't strong enough to say how I really felt. However, and whatever the cause, I felt disappointed in myself. Disappointed that I didn't have the courage to stand up for myself or tell how I was really feeling. I guess I had concluded that their feelings were more important than mine. But to be honest, I was just a coward who was simply afraid to speak up or set my boundaries. Are you relating to any of this? But I was fooling myself into thinking I was doing the right thing. At this point, my heart was racing and I thought, okay, I have this issue that I didn't even know was a barrier between me and God, and now he's just exposed it. Ouch, what am I supposed to do with this? Then he said, okay, now that you've remembered the last time you did it, close your eyes and try to remember the first time you did it. My immediate response was, great. He's probably going to ask us to look into our childhood. This isn't going to work for me because, you see, I had a great childhood. However, I thought, well, what do I have to lose, right? So I closed my eyes. I started to think about, or tried to think about, the first time that I did that thing. And almost immediately, I remembered a situation when I was in about grade 5. I remember the teacher asked everyone to bring cookies for a bake sale that they were having. Immediately, I remembered hearing the voice of another classmate who said with a sarcastic tone, Vianne can't bring any cookies to school because she'll burn them before she gets them here. And everyone laughed. My popular nickname was Bonfire Head. You see, my red hair and freckles were not as admired as they are now. I was continually made fun of and called names. If you read my opening lines of my first book, Going Farther, I said, red hair and freckles and a personality to match. I was that little girl who loved to be in the center of attention. Good or bad attention, it was all the same in my young mind. So when that memory surfaced, I thought, see, I told you this wouldn't work for me. You can even ask my mother. She would tell you that not once did I come home crying or telling my parents of any of these stories. By the time the session had ended, I can tell you that I was leaving a whole lot differently than the way I came. I went from being confident to being confused and definitely not feeling free. Should I be worried that this never bothered me as a kid? Should I be crying now? And because I'm not, does that mean there's something wrong with me? I was like, what now? Do I just carry on to my next session? I felt like I was on the operating table with open heart surgery, but the doctor decided to leave and there I was fully exposed and open. I didn't know how to put myself back together. Thankfully, the instructor was available for questions, so I approached him and shared what I had experienced in his session, just as I have shared with you. And he looked at me and responded with these questions. So when those kids were saying those things to you, how did you respond? Were you angry? No, I replied. What about shy or withdrawn? I laughed and I said, definitely not that. Then he said, did you become the class clown? Wow, I wish you could have seen my face. My jaw hit the floor and something went right through my heart. I responded, yes, that's totally me. But I thought that laughing about it meant that I was handling it just fine. He said, Vianne, the moment you didn't speak up for yourself, for something that wasn't right, was the moment you started enabling bad behavior and not being able to set healthy boundaries for yourself. And that's the point when you started becoming a codependent people pleaser. I began that day thinking I was totally free, you guys, with nothing to hide. But this freedom session was like a mirror that gave me a glimpse into my soul of another hidden blockage. I could now see that I was held by chains I didn't even know existed. But more importantly, my biggest question was I strong enough to break them? The last time I felt this much uncertainty about my own strength was when I started walking out of infidelity. Can you imagine? And I'll be honest and tell you that was easier. I feel the need to stop and acknowledge the title of my book again, Contagious Courage. The path to freedom is a path of harsh realities and tough choices. I know you know that. You see, the chains of our past hold us back from a courageous future. In order to be free, one must have the courage to leave those chains behind. The words of the presenter in that freedom session that day literally uncovered a chain I didn't know was holding me back. That's why I'm asking you to journal the story of the mountain you've climbed. Your words could be in someone else's survival guide. Before moving on, I would like you to reflect on the question that I was asked in that freedom session to determine how free you are. Take a few minutes and ask yourself, is there anything in your life right now that is a barrier between you and your relationship with God? Maybe you're reading this and you don't have a relationship with God, and that's okay. But whatever your spiritual status, would you search your heart today and see if there's anything that you've put between yourself and God that's stopping you from moving forward? And can you acknowledge when you first realized it was there, and why is it there? I would venture a guess that the root of it goes back to people and how you've been affected by something you have experienced like I had been. If you would like to take that first step to begin your relationship with God, or simply have someone pray with you, I would like you to check out the appendix section at the back of the book, where you can find my contact information. I would love to hear from you. But also, if you want someone live in person, even right now as you're hearing this, the Crossroads 24/7 prayer line, where you can access a real person anytime, even maybe right now. But also, you'll find some other valuable resources to help you in your journey to freedom. That freedom releasing incident that I experienced at the conference certainly set me free and set me on a new path of correction. With this new awareness of the bondage of people pleasing, I have been able to evaluate other major moments in my life where I forfeited my freedom with the best of intentions, or where I had made choices out of the fear of man and not in obedience to God. I am so thankful that the Lord has equipped me to catch the tendency sooner, so it won't continue to hold me back. And as a result, I am experiencing so much more freedom and authenticity in relationships. Yes, this is still a challenge to set boundaries and let go of what people think of me, but I can assure you and tell you it no longer paralyzes me with fear. You see, God was giving me 20/20 vision, and that's what I'd like to talk a little bit about next. Because you see, barriers are all around us, both seen and unseen. Even now, as I wrote the chapters of this book, I am smack dab, or I was smack dab in the middle of yet another unseen barrier. Another one that I was not even aware of. I guess that's why they are so appropriately named unseen, right? But this barrier is not to my freedom, but to someone else's freedom. This barrier is one of the most heartbreaking of all the barriers I have encountered. It goes deeper than I can even begin to uncover in our short time together. However, I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge it. And I've had to sit and spend time confessing and asking for forgiveness. What is it, you ask? Forgiveness from my lack of understanding of what people of color or Indigenous people have suffered and are still suffering as a result of my silence. The sad realization is that generations have stood by and remained silent or uninformed. Our silence has blocked millions of people for generations from experiencing true freedom. While it's something that I realize may not be easily forgiven by those we have wronged, I am so thankful for the Lord's forgiveness as I have repented and brought this before Him with a broken heart. It's interesting to me that I have lived so long with this ignorance. Yes, I could certainly speak from experience about the stereotyping of people in wheelchairs. But this fresh awareness of how both my lack of understanding and my silence against prejudice and injustice that was endured by people of color has resulted in another unseen barrier being brought out into the light. Despite of the magnitude of the need for change, our responses really are individual, and it is an individual heart issue. In her book, So You Want to Talk About Race, once you start to see yourself, you can't pretend anymore. I have begun to take responsibility for my own heart, and I pray that you are doing the same. I can see how my own ignorance in past relationships has caused others to suffer. However, now that I am aware of these barriers, I have to start educating myself and asking questions and doing my part in being the change. Loving people where they are and for who they are is something I've determined in my heart to do. Are you willing to do the same? While I can't even begin to understand in the depth of all the pain or even unpack it all, I do know that my part is simply to love. With that said, maybe you can write out what you feel the issue of racism in our society is and how we can together be the change. What do you think? Write it down. You see, grappling with these issues in the past months has certainly been a part of my arriving at 2020 Vision and seeing my world much more accurately. I am aware that freedom will not merely come from a few reflection notes, but we must start with seeing the blockages and then having the courage to walk it out. I am aware that freedom will not merely come from a few reflection notes, but it must start with seeing the blockages and then having the courage to walk it out. And like the author of So You Want to Talk About Race says, if we continue to treat racism like it is a giant monster that is chasing us, we will be forever running. I want to also echo that same statement in context to emphasize the central theme of my contagious courage and say that if we treat our own fear and bondage like these giants that will never fall, we will be forever running. Let me next move on to what I'd like to call affirming discoveries. And before we move on, allow me to leave you with another little golden nugget to ponder. Around the same time my father-in-law asked me the question, if you could do anything and be anything and there were no barriers, what would you do? He also asked me this: how would your life and character be different if you fulfilled your dream? And I can tell you exactly what I said and felt because it was in my April 2014 journal entry, and I answered the question, how would your life and character be different if you fulfilled your dream? And I said this: I would want my character to reflect that of Christ. So I would want to start now. That means I would definitely need to spend more time in prayer, and my life would look differently in that I would need to be careful of the distractions and stay focused on being a master of time management. This is what I said then, and boy, is that ever true. I also continued by saying, I would need to be a good steward of my time. If I was living my dream, I would hope that my passion would be contagious and that I would inspire others to want to change. I can't even believe it. About 4 years after writing those words, I began my very own segment on my YouTube channel called Contagious Courage. Since then, I've been interviewing some amazing people with incredible stories of courage each month. My intention was that these stories would empower others to choose courage. Can you imagine my shock when I found my journal entry with those powerful words years after it was written? I had no recollection that I had written it, but these words were still relevant and still definitely a part of my survival guide. I understand the value of these words today more than ever. These journal notes continue to provide great insight and confirmation along my own life's journey. And it's why I continue to encourage you to also write down your thoughts, goals in your own journal. Remember, one of the biggest barriers that can be stopping us from moving forward into our dreams is our self-perception. How we view ourselves really does shape our development. I have embraced a personal motto, which you've often heard me say, confidently imperfect. It allows me to accept my mistakes without guilt and focusing on how I can improve next time around. Change what I can accept, and what I can't change, I just accept that I can't change it. Even now, there are times when I am being introduced or when I get feedback from something that I have written or spoken and I say, wow, are they really talking about me? Am I actually living my dreams to encourage others with my courage? I want you to know that every time I hear something like that, my confidently imperfect self declares that my trust and faith is in a big God. And He is able to do way more than I could ever hope or imagine. You see, because my confidence is in Him. And that's what people see. His strength through my own weakness. And yes, I would say that's pretty amazing. Honestly, with His strength, I feel unstoppable. I believe that when we reevaluate our perspective on courage, you will also begin to reevaluate your perspective on your role in it all. So, what's stopping you? Your answer to this probing question will shape both your expectation and even your motivation. And trust me, writing it now will help you down the road. Habakkuk 2:2 advises us from Scripture to do this. Write the vision, make it plain on tablets, so he may run who reads it. I believe that this is a perfect example of what we need to have in place in order to keep going. Your written vision for your life is like a roadmap, and yes, even a survival guide. And if you don't have one, you won't know where you're going, and you'll end up wandering with no purpose or direction. I think this is a good place to pause and reflect, because there is still lots of walking in the dark up ahead that I'm going to challenge you to embrace. But also, I want to pray that as I share more of my own discoveries of how I was able to find this contagious courage and unlock a level of freedom that I didn't know existed, it will help you in your journey to see that freedom is within your grasp. And so I will end with this, and with all due respect, I will ask, what's stopping you?